Portal wins, position battles, and whether Marcus Freeman is a top 5 coach in college football. It's all on the table today in a loaded Friday mailbag. That's next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up? Welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily home for Notre Dame football. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network, all thanks to your support. I'm Tyler Wojciak, Notre Dame alum and Fox Sports producer, and happy Friday, January 23rd to all of you out there, and thank you so much for making Locked On Irish your first watch or listen to the day. If you have not already, make sure that you are subscribed to the YouTube channel or following the show wherever you get your podcasts, and here's what we've got coming up on the Friday mailbag today. We're going to start with the impact of new D-line coach Charlie Partridge and how he can improve the defensive line, plus some early thoughts on the most compelling position battles to watch this offseason. Then we'll look ahead to 2026, including expectations for quarterback C.J. Carr and whether Notre Dame's schedule might actually end up being a little bit more difficult than it looks today. And to close things out, we'll have some fun talking past decommits that worked out for better or worse. I'm also going to rank my top 5 coaches in college football, and then we're going to reflect on what I believe was the best moment from this past season. So we've got a lot to discuss today. Let's get into it. Our first question comes from @SouthBendBender. Great name, by the way. Which position battles are you most intrigued by this offseason? Well, nothing is going to compare to the quarterback battle of last season, but that's a good thing for me. As much content as I was able to get out of that, it did become annoying just talking about the same quarterback battle every single day for 7 months straight. And, you know, the funny thing about that is I thought it was going to be C.J. Carr for like nearly the entire time, and then 2 days before it was announced, or maybe it was just 1 day before we got the official announcement, it seemed like everything had turned in favor of Kenny Minchey. So in the last possible prediction, I said it's actually going to be Kenny Minchey being the starting quarterback, and then it ended up being C.J. Carr. So I was right for months, but then I was wrong when it mattered most. So there is no position battle that is going to bring quite that same level of attention this season, but there are some compelling ones. Most notably, who's going to be the starting nickel? I think that is extremely interesting. It's probably going to be either DJ McKinney, the transfer from Colorado, Jane Sanders, the transfer from Michigan, or Dallas Golden. Dallas Golden came in reserve for Devontae Smith this past season once Devontae Smith went out with an injury. But as I've stated before on the show, I don't know if the Notre Dame coaching staff really wants Dallas Golden there long term, or if he was just the appropriate fill-in last season, because throughout all of preseason camp, Dallas Golden had only played on the outside. So maybe they'll give him another chance. If Dallas Golden wants to do it, they're going to give him an opportunity to earn the starting job. But I think they went in the portal and got DJ McKinney and Jane Sanders for a reason, and I expect those two to battle it out for the starting nickel job, and then Dallas Golden will probably be the backup to Christian Gray. On the offensive line, you've got a couple interesting position battles there. The only certainty, honestly, is that Anthony Knapp is going to be starting at left tackle. You can make a case that someone could start at pretty much every other position. Now, you know Gerby Lambert is going to be a starter, but is he going to be at right guard or is he going to be a right tackle? And then what's the status of Ashton Craig once he gets back from his injury? Is he going to be ready to go at the start of the season? Is Joe Wadding going to start at center? And if he's playing well and then Ashton Craig comes back from his injury, like, are you going to take Wadding out? So that's kind of a position battle in its own right. But if Jagasaw is healthy, which, as we talked about yesterday, is a big if, I think the best case scenario for this offensive line is going to be Anthony Knapp at left tackle, Charles Jagasaw at left guard, Ashton Craig at center, or Joe Wadding. That one doesn't really matter to me. I think they should keep Gerby Lambert at right guard. I thought he got a lot better at that position as the year went on. If they moved him outside, it wouldn't shock me either. But if you keep Gerby Lambert at right guard, then you have a really compelling battle at right tackle between Will Black and Matty Augustine. And I know everyone knows about Will Black, former 5-star, highest-rated recruit in Notre Dame's class in that cycle. But keep an eye out for Matty Augustine. The staff really, really likes him, and I think that would be a really competitive battle between Will Black and Matty Augustine. Now, if you move Gerby Lambert to right tackle, I don't know if Will Black or Augustine are going to battle it out. At right guard, maybe they let Sullivan Absher take that spot. I mean, he came in for reserve. He's sort of been the main swing guy. But I think that there are 8 players who could legitimately start for Notre Dame on the offensive line next season. Knapp, Jagasaw, Craig, Lambert, Will Black, Matty Augustine, Sullivan Absher, and Joe Wadding. So Joe Rudolph likes to surprise us. I would expect some surprises there as well. Boundary wide receiver is going to be interesting. Notre Dame went out and got Quincy Porter from Ohio State in the transfer portal. They bring Micah Gilbert back, who I was really high on going into last season, but he just dealt with a bunch of injuries. And then Cam Williams, who everyone has been waiting on to make a move. It just hasn't happened yet. Or they could just go away from a traditional boundary wide receiver entirely and start Mylan Graham and then have Graham, Faison, and Greathouse out there who, they don't fit the traditional boundary type, but those are three very versatile, very fast wide receivers. So that'll be interesting who ends up being that third starting receiver outside of Faison and Greathouse, which we know. And then for some key backup positions, I'm really interested to see who becomes running back number 2. We know Aeneas Williams is going to be one, but who's going to be that other guy? Because we know Jaywan Sider likes to have 2 running backs that he can lean on. There's Keedron Young coming back from injury, Nolan James Jr., who is looking to make a big jump after his freshman season. And then you've got Javian Osborne and Jonas Walton, the true freshman coming in. I think Javian Osborne is more likely to compete for playing time out of the gate. So a bunch of good candidates there. Backup quarterback we've talked a lot about on the show. I thought Notre Dame was going to be a little bit more aggressive getting one in the transfer portal. Didn't happen, so now it's going to be a competition between 3 freshmen. The redshirt freshman, Blake Hebert, true freshman, Noah Grubbs, and then the true freshman who's going to reclassify, Teddy Gerard. Right now, I actually think it's going to be Teddy Gerard, which is a little bit crazy, but that's going to be interesting to follow these next 7 months. And I'm even going to throw tight end 2 in there. Cooper Flanagan is going to be the starter. They bring back Ty Washington. They bring back James Flanagan, Jack Larson, and then they bring in Ian Premer, the 5-star freshman, and Preston Frizzell as well. Ty Washington didn't really impress me last season. I think James Flanagan is set up for a big jump going into year 2, but that's going to be another interesting position battle to watch out for. I'm going to go into depth on all of these position battles on a full episode at some point down the line, but those are the ones that stand out at this point in time. All right, that was a long one. Let's get through this next one a little bit faster here. It comes from @G Bellotti. What was the most unexpected win for Notre Dame during the transfer portal stretch? For me, it's got to be former Pitt defensive tackle Francis Brew. Even Notre Dame thought that Francis Brew was headed to Ohio State on Sunday before we got that wave of announcements. Francis Brew is from Columbus. I think he actually grew up 12 miles away from campus. And when he first put his name in the portal, there were some concerns, obviously, about whether, what would happen if Ohio State got in the race. But when he set up his initial visits, it didn't seem like Ohio State was in the race. And then they were able to get in there. They got him on campus. And at that point, it felt like Brew was a lock to go to Ohio State. But I think Ohio State just cooled off on him a little bit. They prioritized James Smith and Rasaw, the defensive lineman from Alabama, and they were considered a package deal. So they opted to go with James Smith. I thought throughout that entire process that Brew was the better player. So when I found out that Ohio State was going after Smith, look, Notre Dame was going after Smith too. I think they would have been perfectly happy with either guy. But then once it became clear that Ohio State was prioritizing the Alabama guys, then all of a sudden Francis Brew became a possibility again for Notre Dame. And they were able to close the deal there, and it was huge. It was the biggest position of need, the best player at that position that they had a chance with this cycle. So I think that was the most unexpected win, because at one point it felt like Notre Dame was in great shape. Then they were out of it. Then they were the favorite, and ultimately they signed him. And a couple other unexpected wins. I mean, nobody was talking about Jaden Sanders, the defensive back from Michigan. I didn't even know he was a possibility to commit until the morning that he announced. I obviously had heard about DJ McKinney. We all did when that On3 report came out a little bit prematurely that DJ McKinney had committed to Notre Dame. So the idea that they were going to take 2 defensive backs was really a surprise, but the Notre Dame coaching staff kind of operated in silence throughout that process, and it worked out. They got Jaden Sanders, who's a really good player. And I would say former Ohio State wide receiver Quincy Porter was a big surprise, because he certainly doesn't fit the typical profile of other transfer players that they have added in the past. He's only had 1 year in college. He went to Ohio State, and he was a former 5-star, and that was a player who you kind of heard whispers like Notre Dame might be involved, but they weren't even that involved for him when he was a recruit coming out of high school. It was like Ohio State or Michigan, but they swooped in. They got him. They also got Mylan Graham as well, but I think Notre Dame prioritized Graham immediately as soon as he put his name in the portal, specifically Marcus Freeman. He really, really wanted Mylan Graham. He was able to get him. So there were some nice surprises for the Irish in this class, and I'd also throw in Jason Onye's name in there. It's not a portal acquisition, but his return, the fact that he was granted another year of eligibility, was a big surprise to me. I did not expect him to be granted another year, because I didn't fully understand the grounds for why he should come back because he did play 5 games this season where he left the team. So credit to Pete Bavacqua and everyone at Notre Dame for making sure that Jason Onye got another year because that is huge. I said yesterday that was as big as any portal addition that Notre Dame has made this cycle, and it was certainly a surprise to me. All right, next up. At Ryan_2Saint, is defensive line coach Charlie Partridge still the biggest addition this offseason? And who do you see him making the biggest impact with? Ryan, I think you mistaked me for a friend of the program, Tim Priester, because Priester called Partridge the biggest addition of this offseason on his podcast, Irish Illustrated Insider. But look, even if I don't think he's the biggest addition, I think he is obviously a huge addition to this team. The way that people talk about him is pretty remarkable. I'm not going to pretend like I even knew who Charlie Partridge was before I found out that he was likely going to be a part of Notre Dame staff going into next season. But then, once I started looking him up and learning more about him, his past, what he did at Wisconsin, what he did with Pittsburgh, I was blown away. So I'm really excited about what he can do with this defensive line. He's got an elite resume, and now he has a group loaded with talent and an extremely high ceiling. But I think the most important player for him is defensive end Bryce Young. You know what you're getting in Boubacar Traore. He's going to be one of the best edge rushers in the country, but Bryce Young has all this potential. He has all the traits. He has everything that you would want out of like an NFL defensive end. He's 6'7", 271 pounds. He's just a freak, right? But I think last year he put on a little bit too much weight, didn't play quite as fast as we saw the year before, but they need him to be a beast, and I think he can be one. So this is a critical year for Bryce Young. If Charlie Partridge can get the most out of him, that changes the dynamic of the entire defense. We've talked about Keon Keeley before. Obviously, that's critical, but I think the development of Logan Thomas is also very important. The staff likes him a lot. He was actually out there on the field for that 4th and 6 play against Georgia in the fourth quarter in the college football playoff game. Like when Donovan Hinish got the game-sealing sack on Gunnar Stockton in the fourth quarter, Logan Thomas was in the game as a true freshman. So that tells you that the staff really likes him, and they put him out there in one of the most critical moments of the entire season. And Notre Dame needs 4 quality edge rushers. So even though Thomas didn't make much of an impact this past season, he definitely needs to make an impact next season. And if he doesn't step up, then the young guys, Rodney Dunham and Ebenezer Iwatade, could take his spot. So I think those are the main guys. It's all on the edge. Like obviously, if he can make Tiana Gray a more well-rounded player, like he could be a beast. Right now, he's more of just a first and second down run stopper. But look, if Partridge can develop his unit into an elite front, Notre Dame will have the best defense in the country next season. Hands down. So we've talked about where Notre Dame stands right now, but let's take this a step further. What is this team actually going to look like a few months from now? Because the expectations around CJ Carr and this offense are growing fast. It's coming up next on Locked On Irish. Thank you for making Locked On Irish your first watch or listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you have not already, make sure you check out our new Everydayer Club. You'll get access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Irish. It is the same show, same schedule, just no ads, and it works on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast app you use. If you listen every day, it is a really easy upgrade. Just go to lockedonirish.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to the bets you like most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boosts you want to apply. The boosts let you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback play, or coaching. And the boosts give you more juice on the bets you already like instead of forcing you to bet something new. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. You make your picks, then apply your profit boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. Talked about it before this week on the show. I like the favorites on Sunday. I'm taking the Seahawks to cover -2.5 in the NFC Championship and the New England Patriots to cover on the road against the Broncos without Bo Nix. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Welcome back to the Friday Mailbag here on Locked On Irish. And our next question comes from @Andy Honer. How does Notre Dame's backfield stack up compared to the defenses they will face this season? Well, they're going to have their hands full against Miami. That is for sure. Miami finished 6th in the country in rush defense this past season, and they reloaded in the portal. Earlier on Thursday, they added Damon Wilson out of Missouri. He is a really, really good player. And look, obviously they're not going to be the same without Reuben Bain and Akeem Messidor, but with Lightfoot, with Wilson, with Justin Scott, like that's going to be a really good defensive line. And Miami is shaping up to be a very good team next season as well. And that defense stuffed Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price last season. And yes, we can make the case that Notre Dame should have handed the ball off to Jeremiah Love more. I said that a lot in the aftermath of that game, but still, you got to give Miami credit. They leaned on their defensive front all year long. It almost led them to a national championship, but it's going to be tough for Notre Dame to run the ball, and it's also going to be tough for Notre Dame's offensive line to protect CJ Carr. But if they're able to do that, they should win that game. I also think Wisconsin is sneaky good, at least on defense. They were 15th in the country in rushing defense this past year, even though they had another down year. They only gave up 105 yards per game on the ground. That's, kind of what you would expect out of a traditional Wisconsin defense. But under Luke Fickell, the program just has not been able to take off like many people expected. But there are still some qualities that make you think about Wisconsin in their prime, and their run defense is a good example of that. So Notre Dame's rushing attack is going to be tested very early this season when they take on Wisconsin in the season opener. SMU had a pretty good run defense last season as well. They were tied for 19th in the country. BYU was solid. Maybe not quite as good as you would have expected from them, considering they almost made the college football playoff, and their whole program is built around physicality, running the ball, stopping the run, all of that. But statistically, they finished 30th in the country in run defense. But Notre Dame should be able to run the ball at will against everyone on their schedule except Miami, Wisconsin, and then SMU and BYU to some degree. I still think they could have success against those teams. It's just not going to be like, you can just chalk up 200 rushing yards per game or anything like that. But for Aeneas Williams, man, he's going to have to come out ready to roll. Like I said, he's going to be tested week 1 against Wisconsin. He is the guy now. He needs to establish that very early on in this season that, yes, even though Notre Dame lost Jeremiah Love and they lost Jadarian Price, they're not going to make that up overnight. But they still have a really good running back. And Aeneas Williams is a really good one. He's shown it before. He's shown it in big games. And I just think that we are going to see a different version of him now. And it could be, very, very good for this Notre Dame offense. All right, next up, at Brian Murphy, 7589. Over under 32 touchdown passes for CJ Carr in 2026. Did you know there's only been one Notre Dame quarterback to throw for 32 or more touchdown passes in one season in the last decade? It was Ian Book in 2019. And the last person to do it before Ian Book was Brady Quinn back in 2006. I was pretty surprised that Jimmy Clausen never did it, but in 2009, he only threw for 28 passing touchdowns that year. CJ Carr threw for 24 this past season, but Notre Dame finished 5th in the country with 38 rushing touchdowns. So they're going to need a little bit more from CJ Carr next season, because even though I'm high on Aeneas Williams and the rest of that Notre Dame running back room, odds are they're not going to have 38 rushing touchdowns next season. But with that being said, I'm actually going to take the over. Or it might be very close. It might be 32 on the dot. The offense is going to be built around CJ Carr next season, and he has a ton of good options to throw to. Does he have a clear-cut wide receiver 1 like Malachi Fields last year? No, but Jordan Faison is coming back. He led the team in receptions and receiving yards. I think he's going to have another really good season. Hopefully, Jane Greathouse is a bounce-back year. Quincy Porter, Mylan Graham, 2 high upside guys. And then Micah Gilbert is probably ready to make a move. I know Mike Denbrock has raved about Logan Saldate in the past. If he can find his way on the field, maybe he could become that Will Pauling type, where Will Pauling didn't have a ton of catches last season, but he was very effective. He was often used in like third down situations where he just kind of get in the flat, get the first down. And Will Pauling led the team in receiving touchdowns with 6. So if you're thinking about like a player type closest to Will Pauling, it's probably Logan Saldate. Not saying that Logan Saldate is going to lead the team next year in receiving touchdowns, but CJ Carr has plenty of options. He has options at tight end as well. And there's enough bad defenses on Notre Dame's schedule to really pad his stats. That's kind of how, not CJ Carr, that's how Ian Book did it in 2019 when they played Bowling Green and they played New Mexico State. Like, Ian Book had a lot of passing touchdowns in that game. I love Ian Book. I thought he was like criminally underrated even by Notre Dame fans, but that's kind of how he got to 32 passing touchdowns that season. And when you look at this offense in 2026, like, I fully expect them to be able to put up 35 points per game on most teams they play. And if they're putting up 35 points a game, I would imagine 21 of those points come through the air from CJ Carr. And if he throws for 3 passing touchdowns a game, that's going to be 36 passing touchdowns in the regular season. Look at that math that I just did off the top of my head. It's amazing, right? I'm kidding. But really, I think CJ Carr can get it. It's a steep number. 32 is a lot. I would bet that the 32 number that we're discussing on the show is going to be higher than the actual over-under for CJ Carr going into the season, but I still like the over here. And look, if CJ Carr wants to win the Heisman Trophy, and right now he's either tied with Arch Manning as a preseason favorite, or he's second right behind Arch Manning, depending on what book. I think FanDuel had him tied yesterday when I looked at it. If he wants to win the Heisman, he's probably going to have to throw for more than 32 passing touchdowns. So I'm taking the over there. Okay, at Schrunkle asks, is there any chance there is a third-ranked team on the schedule next year? The ACC always seems to have surprise-ranked teams, just never the ones that Notre Dame plays. Okay, so right now, the only sure thing is that we know Miami and BYU are going to be ranked in the preseason, and I feel pretty confident that they will be ranked when Notre Dame plays them. As a matter of fact, I put this out on Twitter on Thursday. There is a real chance that the Notre Dame-Miami rematch in Notre Dame Stadium on November 7th could be number 1 versus number 2. Because for as much heat as Notre Dame gets about their schedule, which, I get it to some degree, Miami's is easier. It is a joke. They don't have anyone out of conference. And Miami has a ton of returning talent. They're going to be a very good team. So they could be undefeated heading into South Bend in November. And Notre Dame should probably be undefeated going into that game too. And then a lot of the top teams in front of them, they play each other. They're going to have tough games. So again, I'm not saying it's a guarantee. We're a long way from November 7th, but there is a chance that Notre Dame and Miami will be 1v2 rematch from the game last season. You've got the 1988 game, like a rematch of that, the Catholics versus Convicts game. Again, I'm just putting it out there. It's January. We got to get excited about something. So I'm just saying I'd be very excited if that were to be the case. Wisconsin, they're not going to be ranked at the time that they play. I've already kind of alluded to it. I think Wisconsin is going to be much improved this season, and I think that the Badgers could actually be ranked by the end of the year, which is what matters more in terms of the college football playoff rankings and all that. SMU has a good chance to be ranked when they play. I mean, they almost made it to the ACC championship. They beat Miami, which seems improbable now looking back at that game. And SMU made the playoff in 2024. So they could be the third-ranked team. I expect them to be solid this season. And it is pretty crazy to me how much people on the outside complain about Notre Dame's schedule this year. And as I said, it's favorable. It's not a gauntlet by any stretch. It's not like what Florida dealt with last season. I'm not telling you it's going to be super hard, but they are going to play the national title runner-up. They're going to play BYU on the road, which could be a top 10 team. And then Miami, like, it's worse than Notre Dame's. And Texas Tech is arguably the easiest schedule I have ever seen for a Power 4 team, which is incredibly ironic considering their head coach, Jerry Maguire, criticized Notre Dame's schedule a month ago when he was actually talking about BYU. Like, he just had this random stray at Notre Dame for their independent schedule, and yet Texas Tech is in the Big 12 with 16 teams, and they don't play the other toughest team in their own conference, which is BYU, but Notre Dame does play them on the road. So it's ridiculous. I think everyone just wants to criticize Notre Dame right now. It's been a good time to be a Notre Dame hater for the past month, but I have a feeling that is going to change this season. It's going to be a long way until Notre Dame gets to actually change that on the field, but I'm starting to think this schedule could be a little bit tougher than we previously thought. If Wisconsin is improved, if Miami is as good as we think they can be, if SMU is solid, if BYU continues on their upward trajectory, you're looking at potentially 2 top 10 games, one on the road, one against the national title runner-up, which could be a top 5 game, and then a couple other fringe top 25 teams. Like, how many other teams can say that? Honestly, probably not that many, but so it goes when you're a Notre Dame football fan. All right, we've got 3 more questions left on today's show. Coming up, let's talk recruiting heartbreaks, coaching rankings, and the most memorable moment from this past season. Stay with us. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert start to finish, without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. And for a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150, all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. We just have a few more questions left on this Friday mailbag before you get on with your weekend. And this next one comes from @DrewBrennan77, who is a regular in the mailbag, always brings it with great questions. And today he says, rank your top 5 college football coaches 1 through 5. So I thought about this a lot. And at 1, I got to go Curt Cignetti from Indiana. And you might say that's recency bias, but at this point, I don't know how you could not put him at 1. I understand that Kirby Smart has 2 national championships to 1 to Curt Cignetti, but we can't ignore the fact that Curt Cignetti just led the greatest turnaround in the history of sports. What he has done at Indiana in 2 years is literally the most remarkable thing I've ever seen. To take the losingest program in college football and turn them into a national champion in just 2 years is insane. And I understand that it's different now with the transfer portal. You can bring guys in, and NIL is a factor too, but it's not like they just went out in the portal and they acted like Texas Tech, just throwing around millions and millions and millions of dollars to these former 5-stars and things like that. Like, no, he was doing it with 0-star recruits like Elijah Surratt and Aiden Fisher and Charlie Becker, and Fernando Mendoza won the Heisman, but nobody was talking about him being the best player in college football when he was the quarterback at Cal. So they got the most out of him. It is just incredible. They finished, 16-0. They win the Big Ten championship. They beat Ohio State. They beat Miami, and they just thoroughly dominated Alabama and Oregon. So at this point, I think Curt Cignetti is 1. Again, maybe it's recency bias. Maybe water will find its level to some degree in the future and Indiana falls back a little bit. But now that they have this momentum, they're going to bring in arguably more talented players in the future. Like they went out and they got Nick Marsh. So Indiana is going to be a force to be reckoned with as long as Curt Cignetti is the head coach. So right now I've got him at 1. Behind him, I've got Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart has won 2 national championships in the college football playoff era, but he hasn't done a whole lot in the 12-team playoff. Got bounced in his first game this year to Ole Miss, a team that Georgia had beaten during the regular season. They also didn't have their head coach. And then Notre Dame kind of manhandled them in the playoff the year before, but still what Kirby Smart has done, what he has with Georgia, he's probably going to have to adapt a little bit. Georgia is not very aggressive at all in the transfer portal, so maybe this could change in time, but I still got Kirby Smart at 2 with his 2 national championship rings. I've got Ryan Day at 3. I know that Ohio State fans go back and forth with him, but they had a really good team this season. They just fell short. I think they were just overwhelmed by Miami's front, which happened to a lot of teams this season. I know that he's a very polarizing figure in the Ohio State fan base because, yes, he won a national championship, but he did have that losing streak against Michigan. And now that he finally got that monkey off his back and they were able to beat Michigan this year, they just lost the last 2 games of the season. They lose to Indiana in the Big Ten championship, and then they go out there and they lose to Miami in the college football playoff. So I still think he's a really good coach. Plenty of other programs would love to have him, but because he has a national championship, I've got him at 3. And frankly, he's owned Marcus Freeman. He's beat Marcus Freeman every time that they have faced off against each other, first in 2022 and then 2023 and then in the national championship last year. But I do have Freeman at number 4. I think that Freeman is the best coach who has not won a national championship yet. So I've got Marcus Freeman at 4. If he wins a national championship, I'm going to vault him up. But until he does that, I think you have to put him behind Cignetti, Smart, Day. At this point, I think you could actually put him above Dabo Swinney, even though Dabo has 2 national championships, had Clemson as the premier program in college football. They've just been too bad for too long for him to be in my top 5. And then to round this out, I've got Kalen DeBoer at 5 over Dan Lanning. I like Dan Lanning as a person. I think he's, a fun guy to root for, but the fact that they just keep getting obliterated in these playoff games, and he also lost to Washington twice in the same year when he had Bo Nix as his quarterback. So it's fair to have some questions about Dan Lanning about, can he be a top coach? Can he get Oregon over the hump? But he's still a really good coach. And then with Kalen DeBoer, I know it didn't work out that great at Alabama this past year, but he also took Washington to a national championship game. So I think that means something. So I gave you 6, but there you go. There's my top 5. All right, next up at Jabro439. The last recruiting class had no decommits, but over the last 5 years, which decommitments broke your heart and which ones made you say, yeah, we dodged a bullet? I mean, losing Deuce Knight sucked, even though we all knew it was coming. 5-star quarterback. Notre Dame got his commitment really early. He actually committed the week leading up to the Notre Dame-Ohio State game in 2023. And I remember thinking, like, wow, like Notre Dame could really turn the corner here this weekend if they're able to knock off Penn State in the biggest game of the Marcus Freeman era. Obviously, it didn't happen, and then Deuce Knight ended up decommitting after a long flirtation with Auburn. But even though we knew it was coming, it still was not fun because, there aren't that many quarterbacks like him. He's a freak athlete. He's 6'6". He's not built like Cam Newton in terms of his, like, width. He doesn't have, like, 240 pounds on him. He doesn't look like a defensive end like Cam Newton did, but man, he can run. And in his first play of the season, when he got to start against Mercer, albeit an FCS team, I understand, he had a 75-yard touchdown run where he was the fastest player on the field, and he finished that game as one start this season, 15 of 20 passing with 2 touchdowns, and he had 9 carries for 162 yards and 4 touchdowns. Again, I know it's an FCS team, but that is crazy to be that good. And the fact that Auburn went with Jackson Arnold the entire season is crazy, knowing that they had Ashton Daniels and they had Deuce Knight. But now Deuce Knight is at Ole Miss, and Pete Golding is going to have to make a decision, man, because it sounds like Trinidad Chambliss might actually get another year of eligibility because he's suing the NCAA. It sounds like if you just sue the NCAA, you're going to get another year. So he could have Chambliss and Deuce Knight next year. I think you got to use Deuce Knight in a Wildcat package because he is that good. In a fantasy world, Deuce Knight would have been happy to sit behind C.J. Carr for 2 seasons, and then C.J. Carr goes to the NFL after he wins the Heisman, and then Deuce Knight comes in, and he plays a season or 2. That was the plan, I think, when they had him committed out of high school, but it was just never all that likely. But still, that one stinks because I think Deuce Knight is going to be amazing in college. Peyton Bowen was one of the most dramatic recruitments of all time. He made the Deuce Knight recruitment look like nothing, but I felt very confident he was going to be a really good player. And even though it sounded like on the day before signing day, he told Notre Dame commits he was committing to Notre Dame, despite the fact that he was openly flirting with like Oregon and Texas A&M and Oklahoma throughout the fall. Even though he was committed to Notre Dame that whole time, I was like, man, that's going to be a really good player. So it was unfortunate when he picked Oregon. And then even on that day when there were some hopes that Notre Dame could still get him to sign because he picked the Oregon hat and he said in the moment he just picked it. He wasn't really thinking. He blacked out in the moment. Like, it was insane. It was an insane recruitment. But look, man, Peyton Bowen made the play against Alabama in the regular season that ultimately ended Notre Dame's playoff hopes. We didn't know it at the time, but it did, because if Alabama wins that game, I don't know why I keep almost calling Alabama Auburn. If Alabama beats Oklahoma in the regular season, Notre Dame is in the playoff because Oklahoma's not. Miami's in the playoff as well. But that was Peyton Bowen on that 4th down, that pass breakup. So it makes it sting a little bit more. As for one that we dodged a bullet, I'm going to actually say Dylan Edwards. Dylan Edwards was committed to Notre Dame, to Dylan McCullough, and then he decommitted to play for Dion. And I was like, you know what? There was some weird stuff about his recruitment that whole time. Like, he decommitted from Kansas State to go to Notre Dame, and they were just like, I wasn't so sure of that one. But then he went out there in his first game with Colorado as a true freshman, had 4 touchdowns against TCU when, the college football world went insane after that win when Colorado beat TCU in the season opener right after they were in the national championship. The fact that Dylan Edwards had 4 touchdowns in that game was like, oh, wow, maybe he is a player. But Notre Dame had Audric Estimé and Logan Diggs that season, so he still probably would have even played. But then since then, like, that has been the highlight of his career. He didn't do much for Colorado the rest of the season. Then he transferred to Kansas State. He basically quit on them this past season so he could enter his name in the portal again. And now he's headed to Kansas. So I would actually say Notre Dame dodged a bullet with Dylan Edwards. All right, last one here. We'll end on a positive note. At K Santana. Earlier this week, he said the season was cursed, but I don't think it was all that bad. What was your favorite memory from the 2025 season? Honestly, the relief that I felt after Luke Talich hauled in the interception to close out the USC game was pretty great, which is probably not everyone else's favorite moment. I mean, obviously, Jadarian Price's touchdown in that game was the biggest moment of the game, the best highlight play, but I just had all this pent-up nervous energy throughout that game and even after that touchdown when Notre Dame was up double digits late, because I think it was just PTSD from the way that the Texas A&M game ended. I was at that game, and then the next Notre Dame game I went to was the USC game, and just the way that the A&M game ended, where it's like Notre Dame is right there, they have so many chances to win it, and then you just have like this slow bleed on the last drive that ultimately ends with Texas A&M scoring the game-winning touchdown on 4th and goal. I was so worried that something like that would happen again against USC because I thought Notre Dame was a much better team than Texas A&M, and I thought they were a much better team against USC, but they couldn't close it out. So when Luke Talich finally closed it out. It was such a good feeling. Like, if you think about it, Notre Dame played in 3 big games all year, and they just were never in a great spot in the first 2. Even after Jeremiah Love's touchdown in the fourth quarter, then they, muffed the snap on the PAT. So they just were never in a great spot. And then in the third one, it felt like they were doing everything they could to blow that game against USC. They should have went up like 21-10 earlier in the game, but they kept them in it, and USC took the lead late. So when the game finally ended on Luke Talich's interception, I got very, very excited in the crowd. And I felt like just a huge relief. Like, I let out all these emotions. I probably had to apologize to the people around me. So that was probably my favorite moment. I think CJ Carr's game-tying touchdown against Miami has to be up there as well. Obviously, the result wasn't great, but in that moment, the fact that CJ Carr could lead his team down from being down 2 touchdowns in that game, leads them down the field for the game-tying touchdown with 3.5 minutes left, and he does it with his legs. In that moment, you knew that Notre Dame had something in CJ Carr. And we had been hearing about him ever since he committed, like 2 summers prior to that, and there's all the uncertainty about him during fall camp. So for him to go out there, have that kind of moment, that was great. So that was such a good moment. Now the hope is that CJ Carr can carry that over to the season and have a lot more great moments, because if we're watching CJ Carr have a Heisman season, things are going to be really, really good for the Irish this fall. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first watch or listen of the day. Please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, make sure to give this video a like if you're watching the show on YouTube, or rate the podcast 5 stars and leave a review. And if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Irish ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonirish.supercast.com to join the club. Enjoy the NFL games on Sunday. It should be a great day of football, and I will be back here next week. Have a great weekend, everybody.